Robert, Felix, thank you very much for being on the West Coast Truth.
Russell, thank you for having me on. I think you're going to enjoy it.
Robert, you've been in the game for a long time now. I've known about your work for well over 10 years. How did you get started with the climatology and your book, Not by Fire, but by Ice?
Well, it's a story I have a hard time even explaining to myself because I trained as an architect. But back in 1991, somehow I got started researching about the dinosaur extinction. And I was just going to do a little bit of fiction. And I started, I was going to make it that a meteor killed the dinosaurs, and then I wrote my little bit of fiction, and I thought, I think I'll look up and see what really did kill it, and lo and behold, that's what everybody said. That's what the scientists said. So I thought, I'll make this, instead of being fiction, I'll make it nonfiction. And then as I researched and wrote some more, I began to notice more and more about magnetic reversals. And I ended up getting onto a different belief, thinking that the magnetic reversal had something to do with it. I thought I was going to write the book in 6 months, and I ended up taking 8.5 years full time researching and writing it. I don't think I would have done it if I'd have known how long it was going to take, but I'm glad.
We're infiltrated in the media from this idea that there's this global warming. It's considered to be scientific facts. But you say that's not the case. How is it that you see it so differently than 90% of the scientists today?
Well, I guess I listen to that other 10% that say no. They talk about global warming, and yet I see glaciers growing around the world. Glaciers are growing right now, and we don't hear about this. Glaciers are growing right now in the United States. And I'll lay you odds that any of your, or most of your listeners in the United States haven't even heard that. But right now, glaciers are growing in California. They're growing on Mount Shasta. There are 7 glaciers on Mount Shasta, and all 7 of them are growing. Now, of course, I'll read newspaper articles, and they'll say, oh, this is so unusual. This is the only place where glaciers are growing. Well, no. Glaciers are also growing in Washington State. Nisqually Glacier on Mount Niña is growing. I have actually visited the Nisqually Glacier twice in the last 10 years. Now, I grant them that the Nisqually used to be receding, but now it's moving forward. I talked with the forest rangers there. They even have a sign posted at the glacier saying that it's growing. On Mount St. Helens, back before Mount St. Helens, that's in Washington State, but back before Mount St. Helens exploded, there was a lot of big ice fields, a lot of glaciers on top of Mount St. Helens, and of course the volcanic eruption, it melted those glaciers, and there was a huge flood that ran down the Perito River. Well, this is another one you don't hear about, but now that glacier, Mount St. Helens Glacier, is called Crater Glacier, now bigger than it was before the 1980 eruption. Glaciers are growing in northern Washington. Glaciers are growing again in Alaska for the first time in 250 years. So there's glaciers growing. There's glaciers growing in Norway and Canada and in Russia. New Zealand, last I heard, all 50 glaciers in New Zealand are growing. I don't know if that's still true, but they were. It's just, I can name so many glaciers that are growing. Just this week, they've got the climate convention going on in Durban. And just this week, the IPCC came out and said that the Himalaya glaciers are growing again. And then if you read the article far enough down the article, you discover that they based that on a study of 10 glaciers. There are 54,000 glaciers in the Himalaya, and they based their statement on a study of 10? To me, that is totally dishonest.
So why would they be dishonest? What's in it for them? Is there just so much invested at this point that they don't want to explore the alternatives, the contradictory arguments against global warming?
I'm going to have to say, I guess there's no money in saying that there's no global warming. By talking about global warming, they're able to get taxes, raise taxes. I mean, this is the biggest transfer of money from one country to another that you can possibly imagine. To me, the IPCC is just out for world domination, and truth doesn't really enter into the subject. I talk about the glaciers because the newspapers report about the melting glaciers. But, there's the general ice field, which is it's up in behind Alaska, but it separates that southeastern Alaska from British Columbia. And the general ice field is the fifth largest ice field in the Western Hemisphere. It is growing. Glaciers are growing on Canada's highest peak, on Mount Logan. They're growing in Argentina. The Perito Moreno Glacier is the biggest glacier in Argentina. It's growing. In Chile, there's the Cayo 11 Glacier. It's the biggest glacier in Chile. It's growing. I'll let you argue. Have you heard about any of those?
I definitely haven't.
No.
Yeah.
I just posted something just this last week on my website talking about the glaciers in the Himalayas because, again, I mentioned that the IPCC has been saying that they're melting, and they're basing their story on 10 glaciers. Well, they seem to be ignoring that there are 230 glaciers that are growing in the Western Himalayas, and that includes Mount Everest, the largest mountain there. It includes K2. These are the biggest mid-latitude glaciers in the world. And not only are growing, 87 of those glaciers have surged forward since the 1960s. So again, we're not getting the truth. So that's what I'm doing here. Is I just keep putting out the truth. And when I started out, it took like 6 years to get my first 60,000 hits on the website, and now I get 60,000 hits about every 2 weeks. So people are starting to hear the truth.
Scientists are saying that the Arctic ice is rapidly disappearing, and the region may have its first completely ice-free summer by 2040 or earlier. Do you agree with that?
I can agree that the ice has been melting in the Arctic, and this one is going to still take some time to prove. But when I wrote Not by Fire but by Ice, one of the things I said in there is that it was a conundrum for scientists because during the last ice age, most of Canada was covered by ice 2 miles thick, just 2 miles straight up on double a lot of ice, and yet the Arctic Ocean really had no more ice then than it does now, and they really weren't able to explain it. Well, as near as I can tell, and I think this will be one of my contributions eventually, but I think it's because of underwater volcanoes. There is a huge chain of underwater volcanoes in the Arctic Ocean. It's called the Gakkel. One of those chains is the Gakkel Ridge. It's actually bigger than the Alps. It's about 1,100 miles long. And it has these huge underwater volcanoes, some of them as much as 3 miles high, and yet they're still underwater. And I'm saying that those underwater volcanoes were what kept the ice from getting deeper there 12,000 years ago. And I believe that those underwater volcanoes are doing the same thing now. There was the Max Planck Institute sent down submersibles. It was, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. They thought those underwater volcanoes were going to be inactive, and instead they turned out to be very active, and they had to be careful because they were afraid there was so much activity, they were afraid it was going to melt their underwater cables. So I think that underwater volcanic activity would explain what's going on in the Arctic right now.
So the ice disappearing in the north has nothing to do with climate change or carbon dioxide emissions?
No, I don't think it has. Well, carbon dioxide. No, I think that is one of the biggest hoaxes that's been perpetrated on the public, because carbon dioxide, as near as I can tell, does not heat anything. Carbon dioxide rises as a result of heating. It doesn't cause heating. The oceans are carbon dioxide, known as a carbon dioxide sink, and when the oceans cool, they absorb carbon dioxide. When the oceans warm, they release carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide is not, it's not a cause, it's an effect. They've got it backwards. The other thing that I would look at too is they talk about the Arctic, but they don't bother to talk about the Antarctic. They don't like to talk about the Antarctic because the ice is growing thicker in Antarctica. And Antarctica is way, way bigger than the Arctic. So that's something that maybe we just don't want to talk about that one.
Is carbon dioxide contributing to global cooling at all? Or just simply have no bearing at all on anything?
I don't think it has an effect either way. It's a marker. It tells us that things have been warming. But the ocean, again, it's because of the ocean heating. I agree that the oceans had been heating since the 1960s. But again, I don't blame humans because, and I don't have the paper in front of me, but I do have it posted somewhere on the website, but the ocean warming begins at 2 miles down. Now, I have no idea how humans can heat the water 2 miles down before they heat the surface. That's a physical impossibility. So that in itself, knowing where that heat begins, just removes humans from the equation.
His book is not by fire, but by ice. We'll be back after this break with Robert Felix. We're back here with Robert Felix. Robert, you're calling here from Kirkland, Washington. What's that, about 2 hours from Vancouver?
Yeah, it's around, now are you talking to Vancouver, Washington? Or
No, Vancouver, BC. We're from Canada.
It's about 2.5 hours. I've got a stepdaughter who lives up there, and or daughter-in-law rather, and yeah, it's a 2.5 hour drive. Or if you want to go south to Vancouver, Washington, it's about a 3-hour drive.
Robert, you wrote the book. I think it's safe to call it a cult classic, not by fire but by ice. And the big premise in that book is that we're entering into another ice age.
Yeah.
So what is Vancouver and Kirkland, what are they going to look like in 50 years, 100 years? Are we going to be buried in 2 miles of ice, Robert?
Well, during the last ice age, Seattle was buried under 4,000 feet of ice, or 4/5 of a mile, straight up. And so I am concerned about that because I am living in the area where that did happen. And I really fear if we start getting big volcanic activity that could happen again. I do have, I won't say where it is, but I do have a supply of food south of the Seattle area where I know it was not glaciated during the last glaciation. So I'm hoping I get enough warning. I have to say that back in 1999 I did move south to Arizona, and I realized, my daughter lives back in Washington, my granddaughter lives there, and my friends live there. And it just didn't seem like a smart idea. I came back, but I am very aware, like this last month, Seattle has had the coldest November. We're now in the top 9, I think, of coldest December or Novembers, and we're already headed into the coldest December in a while. I look at all of the snowstorms. I look back east. They had the huge snowstorms before Halloween, which they've never had anything like that. My brother was back in Connecticut, in an area where the most snow they'd ever had before Halloween, I think, was like 2.5 inches, and he ended up more than a foot of snow. So I see stuff like that happening, or I look at the west coast, or the western mountains. This last May, I took a driving tour through Idaho and Montana and down to Yellowstone Park and back to the Seattle area. And we were talking about record snow all over the west, and the snowpack was 3 times normal, 4 times normal. Mammoth Mountain in California was 728% of normal. You know, I hear the global warming. 10 years ago it was global warming, and then they had to change their wording to be climate change, and now they're changing their wording to be climate disruption. You know, I haven't had to change my wording. I'm still saying we're headed into an ice age.
So how does it work? How do the cycles work?
Well, there is a cycle. Thank you. Yeah, and by the way, I wanted to say to people that to be clear here, that the entire world is not yet colder. For instance, during the last ice age, yes, Seattle was covered with buried beneath 4,000 feet of ice. But 150 miles south of Seattle, it was only about 7 degrees cooler than it is right now. The ice only extended as far south as Olympia.
That's where you're getting your food.
Well, it's south of Olympia. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, because it didn't happen there last time. It was just a little bit colder. The thing about an ice age, it doesn't get that much colder, but what you do get is more and more precipitation in the winter. And so more and more of that precipitation is falling as snow, and less and less of it melts. So all of this record snowpack last year, and by the way, last year's record snowpack that record only went back to 1998. So we had 2 record seasons of snowpack in the last 11 years. To me, that is how an ice age begins. Not colder, but just more and more snowfall in the wintertime. So, but yes, the cycles. There is a cycle to ice ages, and the IPCC and all of the global warming models. They build all these models that are going to tell us if something happens, like you mentioned earlier about the ice is supposed to be, the Arctic is supposed to be ice-free by 2040. That's baloney. Their models are not including any of the known records, of the known cycles. There are so many.
And these are computer models, right?
They're computer models that they don't bother to put in the cycles that the geologists know about. I'll start with the biggest one first. There's a cycle called orbital stretch that has to do with our orbit around the sun. The Earth's orbit around the sun, we think of it as being a circle, but it's not a circle. It's elliptical. And so sometimes we're further away from the sun than other times. Now, so our orbit starts as near a circle, then it stretches out into the ellipse, then it comes back to near a circle again. That cycle takes approximately 105,000 years. And we have a major, at least for the last 500,000 years, we've had a major ice age approximately every 105,000 years. So that cycle is now due. And yet the IPCC does not have that in their models. Then we have a smaller cycle, I guess. This is a cycle of ice ages approximately every 11,500 years, where ice ages, there'll be like a smaller one, and then 23,000 years due to that cycle, there'll be a bigger one. There was 11,500 years ago, we had a Gothenburg magnetic reversal, and we entered into an ice age that lasted about 1,000 years. That was a comparatively small one, and yet it killed the mammoths, it killed the mastodons, it killed the saber-toothed tiger, the American horse, the ice age camel, the ice age sloth. It killed so many. 40% of the world's larger mammals went extinct, and that wasn't even a really big one. Then 23,000 years ago, we had the monolithic magnetic reversal. That was a catastrophic descent into an ice age. So those return about every 11,500 years. And again, it has nothing to do with humans. It has to do with a completely natural cycle. It's called precession of the equinoxes. In fact, geologists know that cycle as the Milankovitch cycle. And I really don't know of any geologists who would disagree with that cycle. So there's two cycles that I do right now, and neither one of them is in the IPCC models. Then there's a cycle of about every 1,500 years when we go into a period of cooling. That cycle is now due. As far as I can tell, that cycle is not in their models. And then there's the little ice age cycle. It's something called the solar retrograde cycle. But about every 180 years is Neptune and Jupiter both end up in the same quadrant of the solar system. And when they do that, either, I don't know whether it's through gravity or through electromagnetic forces, but they tug on the sun, and they pull the sun out of its normal little tiny orbit and make it go, they call it a retrograde motion. So every 180 years, our Earth gets cooler. And that's just based on that cycle. Then about every other beat of that solar retrograde cycle, we go into what is known as the Little Ice Age. During the Little Ice Age, in the last one, during the 1600s, the ice started moving out of the Alps. Now, the thermometers hadn't been invented yet, so they couldn't really tell the temperature, but the way we can tell that ice began moving out of the mountains is that the people who lived there had to petition their governments, their local governments, to reduce their taxes because their pastures and their fields were covered with ice. Well, I had mentioned earlier that all of the snow, that this is how ice ages begin. Not because it's getting colder, but what happens is you get record snowfall in the spring. And this is what has happened. We've had record snowfall this spring. We've had record snowfall this autumn. We had skiing on the 4th of July in so many ski areas around the West. That's not usual. And we now have glaciers growing in the Rockies. That's another one that I forgot to mention earlier.
Yeah, it's routinely snowing in Alberta.
Yeah.
In the summer now. Yeah.
Right. Just less than a month ago, or what was it, just about a month ago, just before Halloween, the headlines called that Halloween snowstorm, they called it historic. I mean, it dumped record snowfall on at least 20 cities from Maryland to Maine. And they called it historic because it was the most snow and the earliest snow in many areas since the end of the Civil War. Now, that is not exactly global warming. And we're not talking about mere tenths of an inch. When we have these global warming records, if they can get 100 to the degree where they're there, but we're not talking about mere tenths of an inch. This snowfall shattered the old records. In Worcester, Mass, they had 14.6 inches of snow. It almost doubled the previous single-day October record. And in Hartford, they had 12.3 inches. That crushed the previous single-day record of 1.7 inches. I mean, 7 times more than the earlier record. Peru, Massachusetts, they had 2.5 feet of snow, and that was before Halloween. And now, and this is, people say, well, this is just a one-time snowstorm. Well, according to Rutgers University Global Snow Lab, 3 of the 4 snowiest winters in the Northern Hemisphere have occurred in the last 4 years. So this is not stuff that I'm making up or that's from Rutgers. 3 of the 4 snowiest Northern Hemisphere winters in the last 4 years. So that's what happened. This spring, by Memorial Day, they had epic snowpack in Colorado, in Utah, in Wyoming, in Montana, in Idaho, in Oregon, in Washington, in California. The snow kept coming. And so that is how ice ages begin. Not because it's colder, just because of more snow. And I say that's where we're headed right now.
Well, I'll go back to my earlier question, Robert, and that was, where do you see us in 50 to 100 years? I know you said it's not the same, throughout the globe, but let's just take the Pacific Northwest, for example. Where do you see us in 50 and 100 years?
I fear that Seattle will be covered with snow within the next 50 years. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm fearing. Now, I've had some people say, oh, well, why are you worried? Because, it's going to take 1,000 years for those ice sheets to grind out of the north. And that's another misconception we have, is that we don't wait for those ice sheets to grind out of the north. It's called snow blitz, because you just get more and more snow. And I've had other people say, well, ice ages, it takes like 500 years for them to get going. And actually, that's probably what I learned way back when I was going to school. But beginning in 1989, there was a project called GRIP, Greenland Ice Core Project, where they drilled deep cores into the ice in central Greenland. They went down 2 miles deep with their drills, and then they brought up these cores of ice about 4 inches of diameter. They were able to look at ice that formed as much as 250,000 years ago. What they discovered is that every ice age in the last 250,000 years began from temperatures as warm as today or even warmer than today, and then they dropped into full-fledged glacial severity in less than 20 years. It is incredible. At first, the scientists didn't even want to publish that. They were afraid that they had their figures wrong. But after more and more scientists came up with the same answer, that's what they realized. Ice ages, actually some of those ice ages began in less than 3 years. And that's from periods of warmth, as warm as today, into full-blown glacial severity that quickly, in less than 3 years in some cases.
So how does it happen? We're just going to start, all of a sudden we'll have incredible snowfalls over one winter, and the snow will just simply not go away? We'll just keep snowing in the summer, in the fall? How does this work?
Essentially, that's right. Now, what I see happening, and I see it happening right now, of course, is the sunspots are fewer and fewer. And that was the case that happened back in the 1600s during something that was called the Maunder Minimum. And that's when the little ice age occurred. But during the Maunder Minimum, this was named after a guy by the name of Maunder who noticed this. But number one, that's when they invented the telescope. So scientists were able to look at the sun. And there was a period of about 80 years when there were almost no sunspots. And that's when we went into the ice age. Well, now it appears that we are headed into another Maunder Minimum type of occasion, so that that in itself is going to make it cooler. And so what I worry about is if we start having big volcanic eruptions at the same time. I think you need both. But with the sunspots going down so that it's getting cooler, and then if we have giant volcanic eruptions that throw all of that ash up into the sky, then that's going to cool the sky even more, and I think that'll be enough to tilt it over.
Robert, we have to go to a break. We'll be back in 2 minutes with our guest, Robert Felix. We're back with Robert Felix. Robert, carry on with this incredible story you have.
Well, some people are certainly saying it's incredible and not necessarily believing it either, but...
It is incredible, but it's not necessarily a story. That's the thing.
No,
this is proven science. This has happened time and time again over the course of Earth's history. So this is not conjecture. This is reality.
Oh, yeah, this is not conjecture at all. And I have so many scientists that are, well, some are agreeing that we're headed into the little ice age right now. I went a couple of years ago, I went to a climate convention in Chicago, climate conference, And I was lucky enough to be sitting in front of Dr. Hubbard Abdusamatov. Took me a while to learn how to say that.
Yep.
But anyway, Dr. Abdusamatov is an astrophysicist from Russia. And he's been studying that sunspot cycle that I'm talking about. And as an astrophysicist, of course, studies the sun. And he says, because of this Maunder minimum type thing and the slowdown in sunspots, that we are entering an ice age now. He thinks that we'll be in a little ice age by the year 2014. Well, that's only 2 years away. And Dr. Abdusamatov is not quite your normal run-of-the-mill astrophysicist, if there is such a thing. Dr. Abdusamatov is actually head of the Russian portion of the International Space Station. So when he says that we're headed into a little ice age, you know, I'm inclined to believe him. And then while I was there at the conference, I met other scientists. I met a geophysicist from Mexico who said that we are headed into a little ice age now. I talked with Don Easterbrook in Western Washington University in Washington State, who says that it looks to him like we're headed that way. There are so many scientists who are published who are saying that we are headed into a period of cooling that will last at least 30 or 40 years, if not a lot longer. But I don't understand it. They just don't seem to be, the media doesn't seem to be picking up on it. Sure, you know, if you go to the right places on the internet, you'll find it. And these guys are legitimate scientists with doctorates, but the media is just not picking up on it.
Well, what can we do about it? You know, I mean, should we be preparing for this?
I think so. One of the things that I do strongly recommend it to people, and I don't sell food on my website, but
no dehydrated food bundles, no?
Well, I ought to. One of these days, maybe I will. But I so strongly recommend that people put in a supply of food, because I think we'll be fighting in the streets for food long before we're covered with ice. All it would take, you know, you don't have to have an ice age. All you need is one summer where 8 inches of snow remains on the ground in the wheat fields in Canada. And you don't need that much snow to destroy the breadbasket of the world. So I am really suggesting to people that they do have food. Even if I'm wrong, you know, with inflation, where it won't hurt to have that food around. So that's one of the biggest things. One of the biggest things I recommend. I think greenhouses will be like gold.
Well, and then you need the weapons to protect your food.
Yeah, there was a I think it was Dilbert, the comic strip.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, is one of the people was talking about stockpiling food, and the other person said, "Oh, I'm not going to stockpile food." And Dilbert said, "Well, why not?" And she said, "Well, because I know where you live." so you're right. The weapons to protect that food are going to be important.
Well, would you say then that basically there is a conspiracy to sell the idea of global warming to the public?
I hate to use the word conspiracy. I think there's a lot of dishonesty going on. I think there's a lot of grant money that these universities are making that they don't want to give up on. Yeah. I think there's a big opportunity for so many municipalities and states to raise taxes in order to pay for, quote, global warming. And it's a money-generating machine. And I'm not sure that everybody wants to give up on that. You know, there was I don't know if you recall the Climate Gate thing a couple of years ago.
Of course, yeah.
It's now come up again, but some of the people at the University of East Anglia, I'm trying to think of his name now, Phil Jones, but I think that it came out that he had received more than his branch there had received more than $23 million in grants. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, people will hold up a 7-Eleven for $40. You know, so for $23 million, I don't know what people will do. But It pays. There's follow the money, as they say.
See, that's the problem, is these become such incredibly large fraternities that it doesn't matter about this fact or that fact. They're going to fight to a grim death to push their scientific thesis.
And I think that a lot of the, I think in a lot of cases the truth doesn't enter into it. It's just what they can get away with it. I do not trust the IPCC. I consider it, I consider those initials to stand for irresponsible political climate cover-up. I do not trust the IPCC at all. I think they will say whatever they can in order to get world domination.
Well, I guess when I ask you what can we do about it, the first thing we should be doing is investigating the IPCC.
I don't think that's going to happen, but I sure wish we could. Yeah, I do not trust them at all. The climate conference that's going on right now in Durban, South Africa, to me that's a farce. I mean, it's all about getting money from the developed nations and running it through the IPCC and then giving whatever small portion of it is left over to the developing nations. To me, it's totally dishonest. It's a hoax. And there's much worse words that probably I shouldn't be using.
Earlier tonight I said that the summer sea ice is the second lowest on record. But then if you look into that a little closer, you'll notice that that's since records started beginning in 1979.
Yes.
Now, if you say the second lowest on record, well, immediately you think in the history of the world or something. You know, you're not realizing that this is only a 32-year-old study.
No, they have. I've seen pictures of United States submarines that came up out of the water at the North Pole back in the 1950s. There have been a record of vessels going through the Arctic back in I think 1913. So I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, it's only since their records have begun, but there are history shows just in the last 100 years that there's been ice free a couple of times. So this is no big change. This is just natural. And now, right now, we're going to be seeing things different. You know, I had mentioned that I agreed that the ocean temperatures have been warming. Well, now, because of La Niña, temperatures in the Pacific have been going down. And normally, La Niña lasts for 1 year. Well, now we're having the second La Niña in a row, 2 years in a row, and we're seeing those temperatures go down. So again, these are natural cycles. Of course, what I see is that when temperatures go up, they blame humans. When temperatures go down, they say, oh, that's just a natural cycle. And so watch that. I'll invite your listeners to watch for that and see if that's not the truth. The next time something is warm, they'll blame humans. The next time something's cold or there's a giant snowstorm, they say, oh, that's just part of La Niña. That's just part of the ice age of the cycle.
Well, they'll call it freak weather, and they'll blame that on people too. They'll call that a symptom of climate change.
Absolutely, they will. It's China, and now they've actually positioned themselves quite well. No matter whether the temperatures go up or down, it's climate change, and it's our fault. That's kind of like you hear about the Mayans in some of the areas in Mexico, 1,000 years ago, that worshiped the sun gods, and they would sacrifice humans in order to make the weather change. And I guess we're back to that kind of medieval thinking of sacrificing humans supposedly to change the weather. I don't think that we're going to do it. Once we can learn how to control volcanoes, then maybe we can control the weather.
Would you say that people have any real influence on the weather?
No, I don't think. I think it's arrogant to think that we have influence on the weather or on the climate. In the city, when you have the urban heat island effect, yes, it might affect a city a little bit, but I don't see how some farmer driving his tractor in Kansas can heat the Arctic Ocean. It's ludicrous. And when you realize that this warming comes from the oceans and that it starts at 2 miles down, it's ludicrous to think that humans could do it. So no, I don't think we can control it. I wish we could, because we're going to need it. The other thing, of course, I worry about very strongly is that I see the United States government trying to shut down coal mining. I see them trying to shut down the oil business. I see them trying to shut down the electric generating plants. I think we are going to need every ounce of energy that we can put our hands on.
Robert, we'll be back with a final segment after the break. We're back with Robert Felix. Robert, you haven't just written Not by Fire but by Ice, you've also written this great other book, Magnetic Reversals and Evolutionary Leaps, The True Origin of Species. Now, Charles Darwin's Origin of Species was controversial, and I imagine yours is too. That's a heck of a thing to say, the true origin of species.
Yeah, I'm going out on the line there. Yeah, Darwin is the one that told us that evolution is a slow, stately, and orderly process. That it plods along so slowly that no one could hope to see it work in their lifetime. We've been repeating Darwin's words now for 150 years, but I think he was wrong, and I'll try to show you why, because as far as I can see, the arrival of new species on our planet correlates amazingly well with geomagnetic reversals. And so it's the same thing I'm saying that correlates well with these ice ages. But the thing is that those magnetic reversals recur in a dependable, predictable, natural cycle. And for people who haven't really heard of a magnetic reversal, what I'm talking about is a time when compasses would point toward Antarctica instead of toward the Arctic. Now, I'm not talking about the world flipping upside down or anything like that. It's just that the magnetic north moves south. And that has happened. This is not something that I'm just come up with. That has happened. Scientists figure that our magnetic field has been reversed for probably half of history. So it's happened a lot. And what happens is during the magnetic reversal, what happens is the magnetic field strength goes down and down and down until it reaches about 15% of its normal strength, and then boom, it makes a flip. Well, our magnetic field protects us from cosmic rays and from the radioactivity in cosmic rays. Now, when the field is flipping, as near as I can tell, that's when we lose that magnetic protection, and our magnetosphere is no longer protecting us, and that allows cosmic rays to come onto our planet. Now, there is absolutely a history in the geologic record that radioactive carbon-14, radioactive beryllium, radioactive strontium, that these various radioactive materials have spiked like 3 to 4 to 5 times normal, approximately every 11,500 years. And that spike in that radioactivity happened in sync with magnetic reversals. So to me, that explains the whole thing. It leads to mutation and to sudden evolutionary leaps, not the slow stuff that Charles Darwin was talking about.
As far as pole shifts go, does it happen quickly? Is that something that we should be worried about too? I mean, if it's not an ice age, it's a pole shift.
Well, that again there's a lot of questioning about that. I read a lot of papers, scientific papers, where they'll say that the last magnetic reversal occurred 780,000 years ago at the Niña magnetic reversal. That was a big one. And by the way, there was an extinction then, and there was an ice age. But I see it happening a lot more, and they also say it will take 2,000 years. But what I see them doing is they're ignoring something called magnetic excursions. Magnetic excursions are times when the magnetic North Pole moves partway south or moves more toward the south, and sometimes it vacillates and moves north and south and north and south. Sometimes it goes all the way south and stays there for only 500 years and then goes back north. So it's really hard to find those in the geologic record unless you're at the exact right layer. But scientists have found the Gakkel magnetic reversal or excursion occurred 11,500 years ago. That's when we entered an ice age. That's when we had an extinction. The Mono Lake magnetic excursion or reversal, depending on how you want to call it, took place 23,000 years ago. That's when the European forest elephant went extinct, and so many animals, the mammoth and mastodon almost went extinct then. And we had a catastrophic ice age. 33,500 years ago, there was called the Lake Mungo magnetic reversal, named after a lake in Australia. And that's, we went into a period of glaciation. That's when the Neanderthal went extinct. Let's see, 115,000 years ago, there was the Blake magnetic reversal. That, they think, is when the Neanderthal got a start. And that is when we entered a period of catastrophic glaciation. So there's other magnetic reversals. There's there's the BWA 1, BWA 2, BWA 3. There's all these magnetic reversals that have occurred since the one that you read about. And so I'm hoping the more I talk about this, that the more scientists will look into these excursions and realize that a lot of bad stuff happens. Now, one of the big things, I'm going to have to tell you this and see if any of your listeners are interested, because one of the big things that happened 11,500 years ago at that magnetic reversal is something called the Carolina Bays. And this is something I thought people would be so excited about, and so far they haven't, but in North Carolina and South Carolina and over a lot of the East Coast, there are what's called Carolina Bays. And, they look like swamps. And that's what they are. They're swamps. They're wetlands. And nobody realized until the airplane was invented, until aerial photography, and they started taking pictures of these things in the air, is that all of these bays are elliptical shaped, and they were all created at the same time. Something happened that blasted these huge holes into the ground, all at the same time. And now these holes, these are not just little holes. Some of them are the size of an acre, but some of them are like 6 miles across. So these holes are bigger than the nearby cities. There are more than 2 million Carolina Bays in the East Coast of the United States. More than 2 million huge holes in the ground, all blasted into the ground at the same time, about 11,500 years ago. It's just incredible. And that, I thought people would be shocked at that, because it shows up very clearly. If you can go onto Google Earth, and you go look at South Carolina, North Carolina, and you get into the right distance, and you can see these things right today on Google Earth. So that is one of the things that I thought would excite people so much, especially if they live in North Carolina, South Carolina. And so far, I'm not getting all that much attention. It's amazing. But I think eventually, I am having people email me now. I found Carolina Bays. I'll call them that. They're immense, but there's Carolina Bays in Australia, and I've been talking with people who had Thunderbolts of the God.info, that website where they think they were gouged out of the ground by electromagnetic forces. It could be. But something, I think they'll eventually date those at 11,500 years ago. I've had people email me that now seen them Carolina Bays in Siberia. So there's more and more of them that are at least showing up because of my work. But I go back. I just think that that evolution happens absolutely suddenly. And when I was researching the other book, when I was researching Not by Fire but by Ice, that's what got me interested. Is I kept seeing that after extinctions, all of these new kinds of animals, new species, new plants would all suddenly arrive with no known forebears. And so many paleontologists, Stephen Jay Gould of Harvard, Robert Bacher in Colorado, but so many paleontologists say that evolution takes sudden leaps. So that's what that book is about.
Well, whether it's an ice age or a magnetic reversal, does this spell doom for humanity, or will we make an evolutionary leap and survive this?
Well, I think that some of us will. Certainly, the Gothenburg magnetic reversal of 11,500 years ago, I have no idea how many people got wiped out, but certainly there were humans on the Earth before that, and we're still here. But I think an awful lot of people will die. Yeah, I do think that. I mean, I sure wouldn't want to be standing at ground zero under one of those explosions that would blow a hole in the ground that's 6 miles across. So there's going to, I think there's going to be a lot of radioactivity. The other one, and this is what people don't think about, I think we'll be seeing carbon rain from the sky. 11,500 years ago with the Gothenburg magnetic reversal, carbon rained from the sky, diamonds rained from the sky. Firestone has written a book about that. He's a geophysicist, I believe, but anyway, he's written the book, is that diamonds drizzled to the earth by the ton. And they found places in Arizona where there's carbon, layers of carbon, more than a foot thick. And I say, why not? I mean, oil rains out of the sky on Titan, on Saturn and Titan, so why couldn't it rain out of the sky here? So that's another thing I think we'll see happening.
Oh. Yeah, I've seen that in the news on CNN, something about that, diamonds and physicists or something.
Yeah.
That's a news story, yeah.
This is not something I've made up. This is something that's verified. The other thing that happened 11,500 years ago is that they have found radioactive levels in the soil up to 2,000 times normal. And again, I think that came because of the magnetic reversal. So it's all ties together.
Robert, you're an alumni for the radio hosts out there. You've done every show, it seems, from Art Bell to this show to Red Ice. It's an incredible job you've been doing over the last 15 years.
Well, thank you, Russell. I enjoy doing it. I've been on with George Norrie a lot. And
Robert, tell us about your books and where to get them and the websites that people can visit to learn more about your research.
You bet. Well, I have iceagenow.info, and I just recently converted that to WordPress so people can make comments. And I also have evolutionaryleaps.com, so that's the one that talks mainly about the evolutionary leaps. That one I update maybe a couple times a week, but the iceagenow.info I update 2 or 3 times a day just to keep track of all that's going on. So both books are available there. I think they're both available on Amazon, but of course I'd rather have them forwarded to me if they can.
And your books are also linked through the www.westcoasttruth.com website. People can go to that website anytime and directly link to Robert Felix's books at Amazon, too. So.
Well, Russell, I appreciate you having me on.
Well, a predictably brilliant interview, and I appreciate you being on.
Thank you. I really appreciate being on, and I look forward to it again someday.